Croeso gynnes I Caerdydd ac I Gymru. A warm welcome to Cardiff and Wales. I was just discussing with one of my colleagues whether I should mention the rain outside, but I'm not going to. And it's an exciting time in Wales. Next week we'll be voting on a referendum to finally give the Assembly the tools it needs to serve the people of Wales, without having unnecessary and lengthy discussions with Westminster. I've been out campaigning for this, and I'm hoping for a thumping yes vote on Thursday. Devolution has allowed Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland to push ahead on issues such as a smoking ban, as well as finding a different path to the one of cuts and privatisation of public services being followed by the Tory Lib Dem government in Westminster. On the same day as the referendum, we also have a local council by-election in the Riverside area of Cardiff, which is just over the bridge from here, and I'm hopeful for a really good result. Best of luck to our candidate, Ivan Morel. Ivan, are you around? But it's the 5th of May that we're most excited about, where we have the chance to elect our first ever Assembly member, if there's just a small increase in our vote. I'm hoping to be at the heart of a strengthened Welsh Assembly to fight against the dangerous and unnecessary cuts imposed by Westminster, and argue for the alternative investment in new jobs and a low-carbon economy that will keep tax revenues up and benefit payments down. Here in Wales, the Labour Plaid Cymru coalition has been in power for nearly 4 years, and it's worth taking stock on a few issues. You've all heard the fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen about the emperor's new clothes. If you're told something enough times, you will start to think it's true, even if reality is somewhat different. Well, let me tell you that Labour and Plaid Cymru are standing here in front of us and all but naked. And it's not a pretty sight. Whether it's building a modern, sustainable economy across Wales, a school education that provides for all, creating a fairer society free from poverty, or the development of clean, low-carbon energy, the cloth, rather than being some fine patchwork wealth breath in, is looking threadbare, ragged, and all but missing. You know how the story ends with a boy calling out. Well, the Wales Green Party is calling out, the emperors have no clothes. Where Wales once powered the world, we must once again become the engine room of the green economy. Assembly coalition policies have left Wales poorly placed to withstand the forthcoming cuts in public expenditure and to develop the low-carbon economy so urgently needed to tackle the threat of climate change. There's been a lack of strategic long-term vision. We've seen a here-today, gone-tomorrow approach to jobs, the environment and building a fairer society. Many have quite rightly been shocked by the recent announcement that Wales has fallen further behind in worldwide PISA educational tests in reading, maths and science. Spending in Wales is now £604 per pupil less than in England. While clearly there are areas for improvement in the education system, such as the staff-pupil ratio and ensuring a higher percentage of government funding actually reaches the schools, the evidence points to relative poverty and social deprivation being the key to lower educational attainment levels. Wales continues, after 4 years of Plaid coalition, to have some of the UK's worst areas of deprivation, with unemployment levels of 25 to 30%. Children whose families can't even afford to heat their homes are unlikely to do well at school. Last week, we heard that 25% of children in Wales now live in poverty. Fuel poverty, up from 15% in 2004. This situation is only going to worsen as fossil fuel prices continue to increase, as peak oil nears and demand from developing countries such as India and China increases. In Wales, we have not used the planning system to prepare for a sustainable future, leaving us poorly placed to withstand the continuing increase in oil prices. Residential and commercial developments have been badly designed, failing to incorporate public transport, cycling or walking provision, forcing people into increasingly expensive car dependency. Until the economic downturn, the Lib Dem Plaid Cymru Council here in Cardiff continued to support a huge out-of-town business retail park at junction 33 of the M4, clearly unsustainable. Multinationals and supermarkets have been favoured at the expense of local businesses and shops, sucking money out of our communities. About a mile from here in Canton, there were already 2 Tesco stores when a third Tesco subsidiary opened just a stone's throw away, threatening the existence of local butchers and corner shops. You have to question the judgment of the Labour-Plaid coalition. It was only a few months ago that they were supporting a £14 billion PFI-funded military training academy here in South Wales, with financial backing from the international arms manufacturer Raytheon. If it had been given the go-ahead, how soon before we would have been protesting in South Wales about military atrocities committed around the world by foreign governments or private security firms trained just 20 miles from here? This week, we've seen the unedifying pictures of David Cameron leading an arms trade delegation around the Middle East with protesters fighting for their freedom and lives in Bahrain and Libya. It's disgraceful. The support for a new nuclear power station on Anglesey by the Plaid Cymru and Labour leaders Ieuan Wyn-Jones and Carwyn Jones is another example of not thinking about the future. It looks like the height of political opportunism as they battle over the Assembly and parliamentary seats on the island. Aside from concerns about the disposal of nuclear waste and possible accidents, in the current economic climate, investment is in short supply, and every pound spent on nuclear is a pound lost to developing clean, renewable energy. At a time when we should be encouraging people out of planes and onto public transport, the Plaid leader has increased public funding for the Anglesey to Cardiff Airlink, which is his journey to work, to £120,000, while the very popular Wrexham and Shropshire railway service to London has been forced to close. Wales, with the support of the Welsh Assembly, has stood out as a beacon in the fight to stop the spread of GM food, with thousands of agricultural jobs dependent on the organic GM-free certification in Wales and across the UK. However, we have heard this week that a Plaid Cymru minister in the Assembly is now open to the use of GM in Wales. The Foss of Ran mine near Merthyr Tydfil was opened with some of the slackest control measures for open-cast mines. Merthyr already has some of the most deprived communities and poor health in Wales, and the mine was agreed just 35 metres from people's homes. If this was not enough, there are plans for a huge waste incinerator in Merthyr and Cardiff. The Merthyr incinerator alone could consume all the waste produced in homes in Wales, threatening recycling targets, increasing air pollution and greenhouse emissions. We must tackle TB and support our farmers, the mainstay of our Welsh rural communities and language. But the badger cull proposed by the Assembly is not the answer when a vaccination programme is available. Let's be clear, sitting on the fence or keeping quiet over these issues is equivalent to giving your support. Green politics has always been about long-term thinking, and never has this been more relevant when the Conservative Liberal Democrat government is taking the axe to public services in the name of short-term reductions in the deficit. With more people out of work as a result of deep cuts, government coffers will have less tax revenue and will be paying more in benefits. And just as in Ireland, the deficit could in fact become bigger in the long term as a result. The last thing we want is more people without work for longer. Many communities in Wales have not recovered from the excesses of the last Tory government. We all remember Norman Tebbutt's On Your Bike speech in the 1980s. Well, some of you might do if you're as old as me. This week, he told the people of Merthyr they should move out of their communities to find jobs. It's been 30 years since his first comments, and all the Tories can come up with is the same old rhetoric that has so decimated our communities in the past. I'm not prepared to stand by while this government's policies lay ruin to the heart of Wales. If elected as one of the first Greens to the Assembly in May, I will stand up for public services. I will argue for the approach Wales desperately needs, not a here today, gone tomorrow attitude to jobs, public services and the environment, but at sensible policies that will ensure our long-term well-being. We need to ensure a lasting economic renewal through development of the low-carbon economy. An army of workers, 50,000 we estimate, could be employed to help plug our leaky homes, install renewable energy systems and develop public transport infrastructure. The irony of having fallen so far behind many other countries in moving towards a low-carbon economy is we can avoid their mistakes and adopt their best practices quickly if the political will is there. We must work with local businesses to develop an economic strategy that grows local businesses. We must provide support to businesses that does not change from one year to the next, that helps local businesses secure public service contracts here in Wales. We want to keep jobs in the rural economy, supporting small shops and reining in the power of the supermarkets, and protecting rural schools, the hub of community places like Gwynedd and of Ceredigion. For all the faults of the Labour-plied government, we are proud that Wales is able to resist most of the savage attempts to dismantle the welfare state and the values it embodies. The NHS remains broadly in line with the vision Nye Bevin had, and we have no state-subsidised academies or free schools that reinforce class divisions here in Wales. We must build a broad coalition of other political parties, trade unions and community organisations to defend the welfare state against the ideological attacks by the condemned government. I support our public services and will work in the Assembly to ensure they continue to serve the public, not the interests of private profit. Following the record of Liberal Democrats in supporting cuts in public expenditure and services, and the Conservatives' newly announced privatisation programme, would you trust the Welsh Liberal Democrats not to do likewise if elected here? This is why it is so crucial that Wales votes yes on March the 3rd, so that laws affecting Wales are made in Wales and will strengthen our ability to take a different course to the Tory Lib Dem attacks on our livelihoods and the callous values they embody. I know how people are feeling now that the Tories are back in power. I cut my political teeth campaigning against Thatcher on things like the poll tax, Greenham Common, and I know many people who have been unhappy with Labour in the past will now be considering them again. But we know they haven't really changed. Ed Miliband provides hollow opposition to the government's policies, whilst right here in South Wales, a Labour council, Rhondda Cynon Taf, is threatening its workers with thousands of compulsory redundancies unless its mostly modestly paid staff accept cuts in allowances and other schemes which will hit their pay significantly without negotiation. We stand side by side with the staff at RCT in their fight to defend their jobs and livelihoods. Greens have been elected to every level of government, apart from the Welsh Assembly, and where they have been, we can see the difference they make. In Scotland, securing millions of pounds for grassroots climate change organisation. In London, getting through scores of green measures and ensuring they remain top of the agenda, whoever is mayor. Greens on councils across the UK have been putting solar panels on people's roofs, implementing free insulation programmes and lots more. Since the first Assembly elections in 1999, the Green vote has increased at each election when a proportional voting system has been in place. In 2009, we received 6.4% of the vote in South Wales Central. Just 7% is needed, and we are there. Greens have a vision for a fair and sustainable Wales, which will appeal to many who feel let down after voting Liberal Democrat at the last general election, only to end up with a Tory government. And Labour voters who feel their second vote is wasted because they will never be able to elect more Assembly members from the regional list. Conference, at this May's election, we have our best ever chance to elect our first Greens to the Welsh Assembly. History tells us that we must look beyond conventional thinking to tackle the problems of tomorrow, not yesterday. That's why, on May the 5th, we must convince those who have hesitated in the past that the Green Party is for the future and that we are well placed to make history. This is our moment. In May last year, Caroline made history by becoming our first Green MP. Let's make history again. Second vote Green for Wales on May the 5th. Thank you. Now, I'm not sure whether you've heard me speak before, but I'm going to now speak a bit in Welsh. So if you can, for those of you who don't understand and have come across the from across the border, just bear with us for a few minutes, please. Byth, ers yr etholiadau cynulliad cyntaf yn 1999, mae'r pleidlais i'r plaid werdd wedi cynyddu ym mhob etholiad ble defnyddir system pleidleisio cyfrannol. Yn 2009, fe dderbynion ni 6.5% o'r pleidlais yn etholiaeth canol de Cymru. Dim ond 7% o'r pleidlais sydd ei angen i ethol y gwirthion cyntaf i'r cynulliad. Mae gan y plaid werdd wledigaeth o Cymru 10 a canoladau fydd yn apelio at nifer fawr o pobl sydd wedi ei siomi wedi iddyn nhw pleidleisio i'r democrataidd rhyfeddol yn yr etholiad cyffredinol. Pwy bydden nhw'n creu clymblaid gyda'r toriaid? Bydd yn apelio hefyd at pleidleiswyr llafur sy'n yn ofni y bydd ei ail pleidlais yn wastraff oherwydd na fydden nhw yn gallu ethol mwy o aelodau cynulliad o'r rester rhanbarthol. Mae'n rhaid i ni sicrhau adfywiad economaidd parhaol drwy creu swyddau ac economi carbon isel a thrwy warchod y sector cyhoeddus a'r wladwriaeth les. Yn etholiadau mis Mai eleni, bydd gennon ni y cyfle gorau erioed i ethol gwirthion i'r cynulliad. Llynedd, fe creodd Caroline hanes pan gafodd ei ethol fel aelod seneddol, y cyntaf erioed i'r blaid werdd. Creuwch hanes eto. Rowch eich ail pleidlais i plaid werdd ar y fai y pumed mwyn amddiffyn gwasanaethau cyhoeddus yng Nghymru. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jake.